ever feel like, you're kind of stuck between wanting to connect with people, but then also needing that quiet time, to recharge?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, especially as an introvert, it's like social media is this constantly buzzing party that you're, I don't know, kind of drawn to. But at the same time, it can be a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
So how do you not just survive, but like really thrive online?
Right.
Well, we're diving into today with this source. Introverts versus social media. Thriving in a world that never logs off.
You hit it on the head there. I mean, it is this whole thing, right? Like this love-hate relationship so many of us have with social media, and the source really digs into that.
It does.
Yeah.
And I love how it talks about that feeling of wanting to, connect with people from your comfy couch, which sounds great, but then suddenly, bam, you're hit with everyone's highlight reel, and it's like, ugh, I just want to log off and take a nap.
It's true. It's almost like this paradox. We have introverts who often, really cherish those deeper one-on-one connections, but they're trying to navigate a world of like constant online chatter, and it can be really draining.
Totally. But here's where things kind of clicked for me as I was reading this. The source reminds us that social media is really just a tool.
Right.
And like any tool, it can be used to create or, well, accidentally cause us some stress. What about you? Have you found that to be true?
100%. And this is, I think, where the source really starts to offer this powerful message, especially for introverts, because it's about saying, hey, you can reclaim your power and use these platforms strategically. It's no longer about, forcing yourself to fit in, but it's about creating an online experience that actually reflects who you are, authentically.
Yeah, it's like taking back control of the narrative, which I think is something a lot of introverts, crave.
For sure.
So how do they actually do that? Well, the source gets into this idea of introverts having these kind of unexpected advantages when it comes to social media.
Yeah.
This part was surprising to me.
Yeah, me too. It's like, you think about it, and one of the biggest advantages is curation. Introverts are, you often notice, naturally gifted at curating their inner circle.
Right.
Choosing quality over quantity when it comes to relationships. And that skill, it translates beautifully to the online world.
So it's like, instead of feeling like you have to follow everyone and everything, it's about being choosy, right?
Yes.
Really intentional about who you allow into your digital space. Do you find that resonated with you?
Big time. It's not even about being exclusive or anything. It's about creating an experience online that feels good for you, that gives you energy rather than drains you, which of course looks different for everybody.
And that's where the source brings up finding your tribe, right? And what I found so fascinating was how it talks about social media's power to really connect like-minded people, which for introverts can be huge.
Absolutely.
Finding those shared passions, but without the pressure of in-person small talk,
Right. It's like, you can find your people, even if they're all over the world. And the source even mentions Bookstagram or those online support groups.
Well, even those niche interest forums where you can really geek out about something you're passionate about, but you don't feel self-conscious at all.
Yes.
Having this VIP pass to connect with people who really get you,
Yeah.
But on your own terms.
Exactly. And within those carefully curated spaces, something really interesting happens. The source was talking about how authenticity becomes not just a value, but this real advantage.
Oh, yeah.
Think about it. In a world of online highlight reels, that genuine introverted tendency to just be yourself, show up authentically, that can be this breath of fresh air.
It's true. It's like that saying, be yourself, everyone else is taken, right? But here, the source is suggesting that, by embracing who you really are, rather than chasing after all those online trends, you're actually going to attract a more engaged and like-minded audience because, I don't know, people could just spot genuine a mile away.
It's so true. And there's something really powerful about that because it takes the pressure off, trying to fit in or be somebody you're not. And it lets you connect with others on this much deeper, more meaningful level.
It's like social media becomes less about performing and more about connection, real connection.
Yes.
But how does that actually work? How does that play out when it comes to creating content or even engaging in conversations online?
Well, that's where it gets even more interesting. The source goes into two key areas where this authenticity can really shine: quiet advocacy and creative expression. What stood out to you about those?
I was really interested in that idea that, introverts might actually find it easier to express themselves creatively online versus in person.
Yeah.
It seems kind of counterintuitive, but the source makes a good case for why that might be. What do you think?
Well, yeah, it makes a lot of sense when you think about like how different those two situations are, you know?
Right.
Online, you've got that space and you've got the time to really craft your message, like exactly how you want it.
Right.
There's no pressure of like, you know, an audience right there, you know, in the moment or having to like explain your work on the spot.
That's such a good point. It's like social media becomes this like canvas for you to express yourself, but it's totally on your own terms, right? You decide when you're putting it out there. You decide who sees it. And you decide, I don't know, how you want to handle any feedback, you know, that comes your way.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, for introverts who I think really thrive when they have the time to process and reflect, you know, it can be incredibly freeing.
Totally.
Because it allows them to tap into that creativity without feeling like they're, you know, being judged or having to conform to any outside expectations.
Absolutely. And, you know, this creative expression, like the source says, it can be so many things. It's not just, you know, writing poems or painting. Those are awesome.
Oh, for sure.
But it could be, you know, like photography or making videos or even doing podcasts, you know, like us.
Totally. I think it's really just about, you know, finding that medium that speaks to you, that feels right, and then using that to connect, to share your perspective, and to explore your passions.
I love that. Basically, you do you. Now, speaking of, like, expressing yourself in those authentic ways, the source talks about quiet advocacy as this other area where introverts can really, I don't know, shine online. This whole idea that you don't have to be leading a march to make a difference, you know?
Right.
Like, you can make an impact in those subtler but, I don't know, equally powerful ways. What resonated with you about that idea of quiet advocacy?
Well, I think it's just so important, especially right now when it feels like, you know, you have to be like shouting from the rooftops just to be heard, right? And this source really drives home that like, change, real change. It often happens, you know, more gradually, right?
Right.
Through those thoughtful conversations, you know, sharing good information and lifting up the voices of people who, you know, maybe aren't always heard.
Yes, and social media can be this powerful tool for that, right?
Totally.
Like it gives you this platform to connect with people, I don't know, all over the world, you know, to share what what you're thinking and support the causes you care about.
Yeah.
And you don't have to give a speech or organize a rally, which can be really intimidating for some people.
100%. It's really about being able to contribute in a way that feels, you know, good for you. It's got to be sustainable, you know? So maybe instead of feeling like, oh man, I should be leading this march, it's like, you know what, I'm going to share some, you know, well-researched articles on my feed, or I'm going to donate to this organization that's doing good work, or maybe it's just, you know what, I'm going to participate in some, you know, thoughtful online discussions to, you know, get people thinking and maybe spark some conversation.
So finding those smaller actions, but doing them consistently.
Yes, and doing it in a way that feels, you know, like really authentic to who you are.
Right, and I love how the source points out how well that lines up with how introverts already kind of, you know, move through the world.
Oh, for sure.
It's that thoughtfulness, the intentionality, and like using your voice in a way that feels, I don't know, empowering instead of exhausting. Because it's not about, you know, forcing yourself to fit into some mold, but more about figuring out how to use your strengths and what you naturally gravitate toward to, I don't know, to make a positive impact.
Which, you know, brings us back to this whole idea of social media being a tool. We've talked about curating who you follow, you know, finding your people, but what are some like actual things people listening can do to make sure that their online experience is like working for them, not against them? I know the source gets into some strategies for that.
I think it really starts with, you know, getting real with yourself about how you're using these platforms, right?
Right.
It's like instead of just, I don't know, scrolling mindlessly or feeling like you constantly have to be on, ask yourself, okay, what am I actually hoping to get out of this? Like, am I here for connection, inspiration, information, or, you know, a little bit of everything?
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's like setting an intention, just like you would with anything else in your life, right?
Right.
And then, as you were saying, being mindful about who you're letting into your digital space.
Well, exactly. It all goes back to that idea of curation.
Yeah.
It's totally okay to be picky about who you follow. Like, if somebody's content consistently brings you down, or if it just doesn't, you know, vibe with you, don't be afraid to unfollow them.
Yeah, you're not obligated to follow anyone. Like,
Yeah.
even if it's, I don't know, your friend or a family member, it's about creating that digital world that feels good for you. Where you're like, okay, I feel inspired here. I feel, I don't know, energized and connected to stuff that matters to me.
And on the other side of that, actively look for accounts, individuals, whatever, who inspire you, right? Who share stuff you actually want to see and who contribute to that sense of, yeah, I found my people. Remember those niche groups we talked about before?
Yes.
This is where they're really great.
Right. Like if you're, passionate about, sustainable living or indie music or even collecting vintage stamps, whatever it is, find those online communities, right?
Yes.
Engage with the people who share your interest. And suddenly social media becomes less about that mindless scrolling and more about actually connecting in a meaningful way.
Totally. And, don't be afraid to just experiment a little bit, follow some new accounts, jump into some conversations. You never know what might come from it or what you might learn along the way.
I love that. Now, we talked a lot about the positive side of social media, which is great, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that, it can be a source of overwhelming comparison too, if we're not careful.
Oh, for sure.
The source mentions this too, reminding us that, setting boundaries and just prioritizing your own well-being is super important. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's really important. And it's something the source is really clear about. It's not like social media is all, sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
It's about being real and saying, okay, this can also be stressful. It can make you compare yourself to others. And, especially for introverts who are, I think, already more sensitive to all that, stimulation.
Right.
It's something to be mindful of.
Totally. So how do we, deal with that? The source talks about boundaries being key. And I feel like for introverts who are often, already kind of inclined to set those boundaries in, the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
This is where those skills are super helpful.
Absolutely. And you've got to start by getting real with yourself. What are your limits? How much time on social media feels okay for you? When does it start to feel like, ugh, this is too much?
Right. Once you, kind of figure out those limits, then you can start to set up some practical boundaries.
Yes.
And the source mentions being strategic with your time. So things like, turning off notifications or limiting your scrolling. Or even scheduling some breaks from social media throughout the day, actually putting it in your calendar. Have you found any of those things helpful for you?
Oh, totally. Turning off notifications, I'm a huge fan of that. It's amazing how much calmer, just more intentional. It makes my whole experience when I'm not constantly getting pinged,
Right, so you get your attention span back.
Right.
You get to decide, okay, when do I want to engage? How do we want to engage? Instead of it being like, those notifications are, running the show.
Exactly. And those social media breaks, don't underestimate them. Even stepping away for a couple hours, maybe a day, even longer, it can really make a difference, for your mental clarity and just how you feel overall.
Of hitting that reset button.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know what else I loved from the source? That reminder that it's okay to unfollow people and it's okay to not feel bad about it. You are not obligated to follow anyone. I don't care if it's your friend, your family member. If their stuff is constantly bringing you down or, it's not your thing, you are allowed to hit that unfollow button.
It's not you're trying to be mean or cut them out. It's about you. It's how are you creating your online world in a way that protects you and how you feel. You wouldn't keep a painting in your living room if it made you anxious. Right?
Exactly. And the cool thing about social media is it's always changing. You can always reconnect with someone later,
Right.
Maybe just your notifications, take a break for a bit. It's about giving yourself permission to figure out what works for you and then just adjust as you need to. It's not one size fits all.
That is such a good point. Because at the end of the day, this is about way more than just social media, It's understanding yourself, what you need as an introvert, and creating this life that feels, real, authentic, and fulfilling.
So well said. It's realizing that social media, any tool, really, it can either, drain you or it can be this really positive thing. It's just about being aware of what you're taking in, the people you're connecting with, and just the energy you're bringing to those spaces online.
And never forget, it's always okay to step away, recharge, and just, prioritize you. Because when we do that, it creates that space for all the other good stuff in our lives to really, grow.
So true. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into introverts and the wild world of social media, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought from the source, something that really stuck with me. It's this: you have the power to shape your online experience. So don't be afraid to, set those boundaries, get your feeds in order, and just engage in ways that, I don't know, feel good, feel right, and feel authentic to you.
Yeah, because when you do that, you're not just surviving online, you're thriving.
Couldn't agree more. Until next time, everybody, stay curious and be kind to yourselves.